So for today's virtual lesson, I'm going to give you an introduction to the plant cell structure. Plant cells are made up of what are called organelles. Organelles, which are labeled below, are what we're going to talk about in this talk. Before we start, could you please fill out the K and the W of this KWL chart? What do you know about cells? What do you want to know about cells? So take a couple minutes, pause this video, and fill out these two sections of the KWL chart. Some things that I thought you might know about cells. That humans are made up of cells. Cells are very small, and we have to use a microscope to see them. What about things that you might want to know? How about, are all cells the same? What are they made of? How many cells do we have in our body?
So talking about how cells were discovered, what was done was in 1653, a scientist named Robert Hooke was examining corks. You can find corks in wine. That's what's used to seal the wine in. Corks are made from trees, so they're a plant. What he had done was he had sliced them into small layers and put them under a microscope. When he was observing the cork under the microscope, he noticed these rectangular patterns. These rectangular patterns he called cells. So how small do you think those cells really are? In front of me I have some table salt and a Ziploc bag. I've already put the table salt in the bag. You can do this at home as well. If you look into the bag, you might just be able to see some fine salt particles, okay? Those salt particles, if you divided them by 100, would be on average how big a cell is. Pretty small, eh?
So, for grade 8, we need to know that cells are made up of different organelles. They have a nucleus, a mitochondria, a cell wall and cell membrane, vacuoles, chloroplast, and cytoplasm. That's pretty tough to remember. So, I thought I might relate those parts to parts of cars. So, starting first with the nucleus. The nucleus is kind of like the wheel of a car. Like the wheel, the nucleus directs the cell functions. It controls all other parts of the car. It can initiate growth or death. That's called apoptosis. And it helps the cell communicate with other surrounding cells. It essentially steers it in the right direction. The mitochondria. The mitochondria are like the engine of the cell, okay? So what mitochondria do are, they take particles that are inactive forms of energy and they fix it so that it can be used for energy. Multiple mitochondria can be found in every cell. The more energy that a cell needs, the more mitochondria it has. So the more mitochondria you have, the more work you can do. It's like the powerhouse of the cell. So kind of like the engine, it drives the cell. The bigger and more complex the mitochondria are, the faster it can go and the harder it can work. The cell wall and the cell membrane. That's kind of like the frame of a car. So these two structures are on the outside of the cell. They provide support for the cell. They also act as a filter. So it keeps all of the essential nutrients on the inside and all of the not so important stuff on the outside. Okay? In plants, you will find a cell wall. In all other forms of cells, there won't be a cell wall. How you can tell if there's a cell wall is if the cell is relatively square or has a bunch of straight lines. Cell walls help promote rigid, straight structures. Okay, so keep that in mind for later. And it'll only be found in plant cells. Vacuoles. Vacuoles are like the gas tank. So, in vacuoles, you can find valuable nutrients, such as water, for example, that can be stored for use later. In plant cells, you only have one vacuole. That vacuole is one big vacuole. If you are looking at a cell and it has more vacuoles than one, it's probably not going to be a plant cell, okay? Chloroplasts. Chloroplasts are like the pump. That's where we get our energy for the car. That's like the gas for the car is like what the chloroplast does for the cell. So, chloroplasts take in sunlight, that's kind of like the gas, and convert it into energy. In the chloroplast, photosynthesis occurs. That's where the energy comes from for the cell, and it's delivered to the mitochondria. Only chloroplasts can be found in plants. So if you see a chloroplast, it's going to be a plant cell. Cytoplasm. Cytoplasm are like the spare parts. So those are the nutrients that are floating around in the cell. They're not in the vacuoles because they're not essential, but they can be helpful for some cell processes like growth or repair. So we covered a lot of information here. I want you to take a couple minutes and finish your KWL chart. What have we learned? When you're done, make sure you bring this KWL chart to class and we can talk about it as a group. Thank you.